I knew the moment I saw Patricia Henderson's face pressed against my kitchen window at 6 in the morning that my day was about to go sideways. Her lips were moving rapidly, her breath fogging up the glass as she gestured wildly at my driveway. I had just finished my first cup of coffee, still in my pajamas, trying to enjoy the peaceful silence of a Saturday morning in Cedar Ridge, Wisconsin. The neighborhood was blanketed in fresh snow from the storm that had rolled through overnight, leaving at least 8 inches of powder covering everything in sight. I opened the door before she could start pounding on it. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, keeping my voice level despite the irritation already building in my chest. "Morning. There's nothing good about it, Marcus Dalton." She stood there in her designer winter coat, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving an inch despite the wind. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stared at her, genuinely confused. "I haven't done anything yet. I literally just woke up." "Exactly. You haven't cleared your driveway, and the HOA winter maintenance guidelines clearly state that all driveways must be cleared within 6 hours of snowfall cessation. The snow stopped at midnight, which means you have until 6 a.m. to comply." I glanced at my watch. It was 6:04. "Patricia, I'm standing here in my pajamas. I was about to go do exactly that." "Well, you're already late. That's a $50 fine for your first violation." She pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "I'm documenting this right now." "Are you serious?" "It's 4 minutes past 6 on a Saturday morning. The rules exist for a reason, Marcus. If we let one person slide, the entire neighborhood falls apart. That's how chaos begins." She looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing. "And I trust you'll be using a shovel as per the new regulation." "What new regulation?" The HOA board met on Tuesday evening. "We voted to ban the use of snowblowers between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. The noise disturbs the peace of the neighborhood." I blinked at her, certain I had misheard. "You banned snowblowers during the daytime." "During morning and daytime hours, yes. Too many people were running them at 7, 8 in the morning on weekends, disturbing those of us who like to sleep in." The vote was unanimous among board members present. "So when exactly am I supposed to use a snowblower?" "Between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., obviously. Or you can use a shovel like a responsible neighbor. Several residents have already complained about the noise pollution." "Let me get this straight. You want people to either hand shovel 8 inches of heavy, wet snow or run snowblowers in the middle of the night. Those are your options as outlined in the updated community guidelines, yes. Now, I need to continue my rounds. I'll expect to see your driveway cleared within the hour, or that's an additional fine." She turned on her heel and marched toward the next house, her boots crunching in the snow. I stood there in the doorway, cold air rushing into my house, trying to process what had just happened. Patricia Henderson had been the HOA president for 3 years now, and each year she seemed to find new ways to make everyone's lives more difficult. She had fined my neighbor Tom for having his garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. She had sent violation notices to the Johnsons for planting roses that were the wrong shade of pink. She had even tried to ban basketball hoops because the sound of bouncing balls was disruptive to the community aesthetic. But banning snowblowers during reasonable hours, that was a new level of absurd. I closed the door and headed to my bedroom to get dressed. My wife Sarah was still asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow. She had worked a double shift at the hospital and deserved the rest. The last thing she needed was the sound of me shoveling snow for 2 hours straight. I pulled on my winter gear and headed to the garage, looking at my perfectly good snowblower sitting there, useless. The machine had cost me $800 last year, and now I was supposed to just let it gather dust, because Patricia Henderson wanted quiet Saturday mornings. The snow was heavy and wet, the kind that makes your back scream after the first 10 minutes of shoveling. I started at the top of the driveway, working my way down in strips. My driveway was 40 feet long and wide enough for 2 cars. At this rate, I would be out here until lunchtime. 30 minutes in, I heard the familiar roar of a snowblower. I looked up to see my neighbor Jeff Chen clearing his driveway with ease, the machine cutting through the snow like butter. He waved at me cheerfully. I dropped my shovel and walked over. "Did you get the memo about the snowblower ban?" Jeff's smile faded. "What ban?" "Patricia just told me. No snowblowers between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. He stared at me, then at his snowblower, then back at me. "You're joking." I wish I was. As if summoned by the mere mention of her name, Patricia appeared from behind a hedge, her phone already raised. "Mr. Chen, turn that machine off immediately." Jeff killed the engine. "Patricia, what's this about a ban?" "The HOA board has enacted a new noise ordinance. Snowblowers may only be operated between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. You're in direct violation. That's a $100 fine for your first offense." $100. Marcus said his fine was $50. His violation was for delayed snow removal. Yours is for prohibited equipment usage. 2 different infractions. She was typing on her phone again, documenting everything. Jeff's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. When did this rule even get passed?" "Tuesday evening at the board meeting. All residents were notified via email." "I never got any email." "That's not the HOA's responsibility. If your email provider filtered it to spam, that's your problem. Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse for breaking them." Patricia tucked her phone into her pocket. "Now, both of you need to clear your driveways properly or face additional fines." "Good day, gentlemen." She walked off, leaving Jeff and me standing in the snow, staring after her in disbelief. "I'm calling the other board members," Jeff said. "This can't be legal." "Who else is on the board?" "Patricia, obviously. Then there's Linda Morrison and George Tucker." "But George moved to Arizona last month, so I don't think he even voted." "So Patricia and Linda passed this with just 2 votes, apparently." Jeff shook his head. "Linda does whatever Patricia says. They're best friends, have been since high school, apparently." I watched Jeff push his snowblower back into his garage, defeat written across his face. My own back was already aching from the half of my driveway I had managed to clear. I returned to my shovel and kept working, each scoop feeling heavier than the last. By the time I finished, it was almost 9 in the morning. I was sweating despite the cold, my hands were blistered, and my lower back felt like someone had been using it as a punching bag. I stumbled inside to find Sarah in the kitchen, making breakfast. "You look terrible," she said, concern crossing her face. "What happened?" I explained the situation while downing a glass of water. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. "That's insane. When are people supposed to clear their driveways? Most people work during the day. They can't just stay up until 8 at night to snowblow. Apparently, Patricia doesn't care. She just wants her quiet mornings." Sarah crossed her arms. "This is the same woman who installed those massive decorative wind chimes that keep everyone awake when it's windy, right? The very same. So she can make noise, but nobody else can. Welcome to the Patricia Henderson experience." Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee, thinking. "You know what you should do? Follow the rule exactly as written. If she says you can use your snowblower between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., then do exactly that." "What do you mean?" "The next time it snows, wait until 8 p.m. and clear the driveway then. Or better yet, do it at midnight, right in the middle of her precious quiet time." Sarah's eyes sparkled with mischief. She wants to be technical about the rules. "Let's be technical right back." I considered this. You know she lives 3 doors down, she probably wouldn't even hear it. Oh, I bet she would. Sound carries at night, especially if you added some extra illumination so you could see what you're doing. Sarah grinned. You know, for safety reasons. The idea was starting to appeal to me. We do have those portable LED work lights in the garage. We do indeed, and they're very, very bright. I kissed my wife, grateful for her devious mind. You're brilliant, you know that, I know. Now go take a hot shower before your back seizes up completely. The next snowfall came on Wednesday evening. I had been watching the weather forecast obsessively, hoping for another good storm. The meteorologists predicted 6 to 8 inches starting around dinner time, with the snow ending by 10 p.m. Perfect. I made sure to tell Jeff and several other neighbors about my plan. Word spread quickly. By the time the snow started falling, half the neighborhood knew what I was planning to do. Sarah and I had a quiet dinner while the snow piled up outside. I watched the flakes swirl past the windows, feeling a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced since I was a kid waiting for Christmas morning. Around 9:30, I checked outside. The snow was still coming down steadily, but the weather radar showed the system moving east. By 10:15, the snow had stopped. I set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. and tried to take a nap. Sleep didn't come easily. I was too excited about what I was about to do. When the alarm went off, I dressed in my warmest winter gear and headed to the garage. Sarah followed, bundled in her robe and slippers. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, though she was smiling. "Absolutely. I'm just following the HOA rules exactly as written." I pulled out both LED work lights. Each one was rated at 10,000 lumens, bright enough to light up a construction site. I positioned them at strategic points around my driveway, angling them to maximize illumination. Then, I rolled out my snowblower, checked the fuel, and primed the engine. It was 11:58 p.m. At exactly midnight, I pulled the starter cord. The engine roared to life, shattering the peaceful silence of the sleeping neighborhood. The sound echoed off the houses, amplified by the snow covering everything. I engaged the auger and began clearing my driveway, the snowblower's headlight and my 2 work lights turning the area into something resembling a football field at night. It was glorious. The snowblower cut through the fresh powder effortlessly. What would have taken me 2 hours with a shovel took 15 minutes with the machine. I made careful, precise passes, ensuring every inch of my driveway was perfectly clear. The work lights cast long shadows across the snow, and I could see curtains twitching in neighboring windows. Some of those curtains were at Patricia Henderson's house. I finished the driveway and decided to do the sidewalk too. Then I cleared the area around my mailbox. Why not? I was already out here and the rules said I could use my snowblower until 6 a.m. I had plenty of time. By the time I finished, it was 12:35. I turned off the snowblower and was loading it back into the garage when I heard a door slam. Patricia Henderson came storming down the street in her bathrobe and winter boots, her face twisted in fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed. "Clearing my driveway, Patricia, just following the HOA rules." I kept my voice calm and pleasant. "At midnight, with those ridiculous lights, you woke up the entire neighborhood. The rules state that snowblowers can only be used between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's currently 12:36 a.m., which falls well within that window, and the lights are necessary for safety. I wouldn't want to trip and injure myself in the dark. This is harassment. No, this is compliance. I'm following the rules exactly as you wrote them." I started unplugging the work lights. "Is there a problem with the way I cleared my driveway? Because it looks pretty perfect to me." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You You did this on purpose. I did this because it snowed, and the HOA requires driveways to be cleared within 6 hours. The snow stopped at 10:15, which means I have until 4:15 a.m. to finish. I'm actually 3 hours and 45 minutes early. You should be thanking me for being such a responsible homeowner. I'll fine you for this. For what? Following the rules. Go ahead, try. I'd love to see how that holds up when I file a complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. I picked up my work lights and headed toward the garage. Good night, Patricia. Sleep well. She stood there sputtering in the street while I went inside. Sarah was watching from the window, trying not to laugh too loudly. Did you see her face? She whispered. I wish I had gotten a picture. It was priceless. We watched as Patricia stomped back to her house, slamming her door hard enough that we could hear it from 3 houses away. Lights were on in several homes now, and I could see people looking out their windows, trying to figure out what had happened. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jeff Chen. That was amazing. I heard the whole thing from my bedroom. Patricia sounded like she was going to explode. I texted back, just following the rules. Within minutes, I had messages from 6 other neighbors, all expressing their support and amusement. Apparently, I had become a folk hero of the subdivision in the span of 30 minutes. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from Patricia, of course, citing me for excessive noise during quiet hours and improper use of exterior lighting. The fines totaled $300. I took a photo of the notice and sent it to my lawyer. His name was Robert Chen, Jeff's cousin, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. He called me within an hour. Marcus, this is the most absurd thing I've seen in 20 years of practice, Robert said, laughter in his voice. She's citing you for violating quiet hours while simultaneously maintaining a rule that forces you to use noisy equipment during those exact hours. It's a logical impossibility. So the fine won't hold up. Not a chance. In fact, this is grounds for challenging the entire snowblower ban. The rule itself is unreasonable and potentially illegal under Wisconsin property law. HOAs have to demonstrate that their rules serve a legitimate community interest and aren't arbitrary or capricious. Banning snowblowers during all reasonable daylight hours is definitely arbitrary. What should I do? First, don't pay the fine. Second, file a formal complaint with the HOA board requesting a review of the snowblower ban. Third, if they don't reverse it, we file suit. This is cut and dry. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. I haven't had a case this entertaining in years. Oh, and Marcus. If it snows again before this gets resolved, do exactly what you did last night. Same time, same lights, everything. We want to establish a pattern of compliance with their stated rules. You got it. I spent the rest of Thursday drafting my formal complaint. I cited the contradiction between the quiet hours ordinance and the snowblower restriction. I pointed out that the rule effectively banned snowblowers entirely for people who worked evening shifts. I noted that hand shoveling heavy snow posed a health risk, especially for older residents. I even included statistics on snow removal-related injuries and heart attacks. I submitted the complaint that evening via email to all 3 board members, Patricia Henderson, Linda Morrison, and technically still George Tucker, though he was in Arizona. Friday morning, I received a response. It was from Patricia, naturally. Mr. Dalton, your complaint has been received and will be addressed at the next scheduled board meeting in February. In the meantime, all current HOA rules and regulations remain in full effect. Your outstanding fines must be paid within 30 days or additional penalties will be assessed. Regards, Patricia Henderson, HOA President. February. The next meeting wasn't for another 5 weeks. I forwarded the email to Robert. His response was brief. Perfect. They're refusing to address an urgent issue in a timely manner. That's another strike against them. Let it snow. As if the universe was listening, the weather forecast for Saturday night called for a major winter storm. 10 to 14 inches expected, with the snow starting around 6 p.m. and continuing until 2 or 3 in the morning. I made sure my snowblower was fueled and ready. I charged the batteries on both work lights. I told Sarah to wear earplugs when she went to bed, and I waited. The snow started right on schedule. It came down heavy and fast, the kind of storm that would have schools closing and offices shutting down early. By 10 p.m., there were already 8 inches on the ground and it showed no signs of stopping. I stayed up late, watching movies and checking the radar. The snow finally tapered off around 2:30 a.m. I gave it another 30 minutes to make sure it was completely done, then geared up. At 3 a.m., I fired up the work lights and the snowblower. The sound was even louder in the dead of night, when absolutely everyone was asleep. The snowblower's engine growled and roared as it chewed through more than a foot of powder. The work lights blazed like twin suns, casting harsh shadows across the pristine white landscape. I took my time, making sure every pass was perfect. I cleared the driveway, then the sidewalk, then the area around the mailbox again. I even cleared a path to the trash cans on the side of the house. Lights came on all over the neighborhood. This time, though, I wasn't alone. I heard another engine start up 2 houses down, then another. Jeff Chen rolled his snowblower out of his garage, set up his own work lights, and started clearing his driveway. Mike Williams across the street did the same. Within 15 minutes, there were 6 snowblowers running simultaneously, all of us working under portable floodlights, turning the middle of the night into something resembling a very loud, very bright parade. Patricia's front door flew open. She stood on her porch in her bathrobe, screaming something that was completely drowned out by the sound of 6 snowblowers running at once. She pulled out her phone, presumably to take photos or video, but there was nothing to see except homeowners following the HOA rules exactly as written. I waved at her cheerfully. So did Jeff. So did Mike. She retreated into her house and slammed the door. We kept working until every driveway was immaculate. It was almost 4 in the morning by the time we finished. We all stood in the street afterward, the work lights still blazing, congratulating each other on a job well done. Same time next snowfall? Jeff asked, grinning. Absolutely, Mike said. This is the most fun I've had since we moved here. We should make T-shirts, someone suggested. Midnight Snow Crew. We all laughed, the sound carrying through the quiet neighborhood. I went inside to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, shaking her head in amusement. You've started a revolution, she said. I've started compliance, I corrected. There's a difference. Patricia is going to lose her mind. Patricia already lost her mind. That's how we got here. Sunday morning, I found another notice on my door. This one was from Patricia again, but the tone was different. Instead of fines, she was announcing an emergency HOA board meeting for Tuesday evening to address community concerns regarding snow removal procedures. I texted Robert immediately. I'll be there, he replied. This should be interesting. I spent Sunday and Monday spreading the word about the meeting. By Tuesday evening, 47 people showed up to the community center where HOA meetings were normally held. The room only had capacity for 30. People were standing in the back and spilling out into the hallway. Patricia looked horrified when she saw the turnout. She sat at the front table with Linda Morrison, both of them whispering urgently. There was a nameplate for George Tucker, but obviously his seat was empty at 7 p.m. Sharp. Patricia called the meeting to order by banging a gavel on the table like she was a judge. This emergency meeting has been called to address the recent disturbances regarding snow removal, she began, her voice shaky. Several residents have been engaging in disruptive behavior under the guise of following HOA guidelines. Point of order. Robert Chen stood up, looking every bit the professional lawyer in his suit and tie. I'm Robert Chen, legal counsel for Mr. Marcus Dalton and several other residents. Before we proceed, I'd like to request clarification on the validity of this board meeting. My understanding is that George Tucker, the third board member, relocated to Arizona last month and has not officially resigned. Is that correct? Patricia's face went pale. George's status is complicated. It's actually quite simple. Either he's on the board or he isn't. If he's on the board, his relocation to another state may invalidate his position according to HOA bylaws, which require board members to be residents of the community. If he's not on the board, then the December meeting where the snowblower ban was enacted may not have had proper quorum. Linda Morrison leaned over to whisper something to Patricia. The HOA president looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. George is in the process of transitioning his residence, Patricia said carefully. He maintains ownership of his property here. But he doesn't live here, Robert pressed, which means that according to Article 5, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws, he is not eligible to serve on the board. Which means the December meeting had only 2 board members present. And according to Article 4, Section 2, a quorum requires at least 3 board members for any official vote. Without proper quorum, no binding decisions can be made. The room erupted in whispers. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. That's a technicality, she shouted. It's the rules, Robert said calmly. The very same rules you've been using to fine residents. If the December meeting didn't have proper quorum, then the snowblower ban was never legally enacted. Which means every fine you've issued for violating that ban is invalid. We had proper quorum. George participated by phone. You have minutes from that meeting showing his participation. Patricia shuffled through papers on the table. Well, the minutes are being finalized. You don't have them, do you? Because George wasn't actually on the call. I know this because I spoke with George this afternoon. He's been in Arizona since mid-November, and he had no idea there was even a December meeting. He certainly didn't vote on any snowblower ban. The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once. Patricia's face went from pale to bright red. Linda Morrison looked like she wanted to disappear. Robert waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Furthermore, even if the meeting had proper quorum, the rule itself is unreasonable and unenforceable. It creates an impossible situation where residents must choose between violating noise ordinances or violating snow removal requirements. The rule also discriminates against shift workers and people with physical limitations who rely on snowblowers. Finally, the rule was enacted without proper notice to residents. While Ms. Henderson claims an email was sent, I've spoken with 23 residents who received no such email. That's their email provider's fault, not ours, Patricia interjected. HOA bylaws require written notice to be delivered via mail or hand delivery for any meeting where rules will be voted on. Email alone is insufficient. Did you send written notice? Silence. I'll take that as a no, Robert said. So to summarize, the December meeting likely lacked proper quorum, written notice was not provided, and the rule itself is unreasonable and potentially illegal. I move that the board immediately void the snowblower ban and rescind all associated fines. Seconded. someone shouted from the back. At least 10 other people echoed the second. Patricia looked around the room in panic. We can't just void a board decision because people don't like it. You can if it was never legal to begin with, Robert said. Put it to a vote. Everyone in this room is a resident. Let's see how many people support the ban. That's not how HOA boards work. Then call a special election to replace the board members. Because right now, you have 2 people trying to dictate rules for a community of 86 homes, and you're doing it without following your own bylaws. Jeff Chen stood up. I nominate Robert Chen for the HOA board. Seconded. At least 20 people shouted this time. I nominate Marcus Dalton for the HOA board. Someone else called out. Seconded. More nominations followed. Within 5 minutes, there were 8 nominees for board positions. Patricia tried to regain control by banging her gavel, but nobody was paying attention to her anymore. Finally, Mike Williams, a retired postal worker who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, stood up and whistled loudly. Everyone stopped talking. Let's do this properly, Mike said. According to the bylaws, any resident can call for a special election with a petition signed by 20% of homeowners. That's 17 signatures. Let's pass around a petition right now. Someone produced a notebook, and a petition was hastily drafted. It circulated through the room. Within 10 minutes, 34 people had signed it. Mike walked to the front and placed the petition on the table in front of Patricia. There you go. Proper procedure followed to the letter. We're calling for a special election to be held no more than 30 days from tonight. All 3 board positions are up for election. Patricia stared at the petition like it was a snake. This is a coup. This is democracy, Mike said. Something you seem to have forgotten about. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Patricia tried to maintain order, but it was useless. People were too angry, too fired up, too done with her authoritarian nonsense. Eventually, she and Linda gathered their papers and left, leaving the residents to figure things out themselves. Robert took charge, outlining the process for the special election. Nominations would be open for 1 week, followed by 2 weeks of campaigning, then the vote. It would all be done according to the bylaws, completely legal and proper. I walked out of that meeting feeling lighter than I had in months. Sarah was waiting for me in the parking lot, having listened to the whole thing from the hallway. You're going to be on the HOA board, she said. Looks that way. Promise me you won't turn into Patricia. I promise. My first act will be to legalize snowblowers during daylight hours. Your second act should be to ban those hideous wind chimes on her porch, I laughed. 1 step at a time. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. 8 people ended up running for the 3 board positions. Me, Robert Chen, Mike Williams, Jennifer Torres, who taught at the local middle school, Greg Franklin, who was a firefighter, Linda Morrison trying to keep her seat, Patricia Henderson trying to keep hers, and surprisingly, Beverly Coleman, a 72-year-old retired librarian who had lived in the neighborhood since the houses were first built. Patricia and Linda ran on a platform of maintaining order and property values. The rest of us ran on a platform of reasonable rules reasonably enforced. It wasn't even close. When the votes were counted, I came in first with 67 votes. Mike Williams came in second with 64 votes. Robert Chen came in third with 61 votes. Patricia Henderson got 9 votes. Linda Morrison got 7, and I suspect most of those came from their immediate family members. The inauguration of the new board was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Patricia had to officially hand over all HOA documents, financial records, and keys to the community center. She did so with a look of pure venom, but she did it. Our first official act as the new board was to void the snowblower ban. The vote was unanimous. Our second act was to rescind all fines that had been issued under that ban. Our third act was to establish reasonable quiet hours, no loud equipment between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., with exceptions for emergencies. It was common sense stuff, the kind of rules that most neighborhoods operated under without even thinking about it. Patricia stood up during the public comment period, her face twisted in anger. "You're all going to regret this," she said. "Without strong leadership, this neighborhood will fall apart. Property values will plummet. It will be chaos. Or," I said calmly, "people will just be able to live their lives without someone constantly looking over their shoulders, waiting to fine them for minor infractions. We'll see how it goes." She stormed out, Linda Morrison scurrying behind her. The next snowfall came 2 weeks later on a Saturday morning. I woke up to 6 inches of fresh powder and smiled. At 8 a.m., I rolled out my snowblower and cleared my driveway in 15 minutes. Up and down the street, I could hear other snowblowers doing the same. It was efficient, it was reasonable, and most importantly, it was allowed. No fines. No violations. No Patricia Henderson peering out her window with her phone ready to document infractions. Just people taking care of their property, the way it should be. Life in the neighborhood settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. The new HOA board met once a month, addressed issues as they came up, and generally stayed out of people's way. We weren't trying to control everyone's lives. We were just maintaining common areas and making sure the neighborhood stayed pleasant. Patricia, meanwhile, became increasingly isolated. Without her power as HOA president, she had no authority to boss anyone around. She tried a few times to file complaints about various neighbors, but the new board reviewed each one carefully and dismissed anything that wasn't a legitimate issue. Her wind chimes, however, became a problem in April when spring storms started rolling through. Multiple neighbors complained about the noise, and we were forced to enforce our own noise ordinances against her. She had to take them down. The irony was not lost on anyone. Then, in early May, something interesting happened. I was checking the mail when Beverly Coleman approached me, looking concerned. "Marcus, do you have a minute?" "Of course, Beverly. What's up?" "I've been reviewing the HOA financial records from the past few years, just trying to get everything organized, and I found some discrepancies." That got my attention. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Money that's gone missing. Not huge amounts, but it adds up. Over the past 3 years, roughly $40,000 in HOA dues and fees can't be accounted for." I stared at her. $40,000, give or take. The records are a mess. Patricia's bookkeeping was creative. Lots of expenses for things like community beautification and administrative costs that don't have any backup documentation. No receipts, no invoices, nothing. Where did the money go? That's what we need to find out. I think we should hire a forensic accountant to go through everything properly. But Marcus, if this is what I think it is, we need to involve the police. Beverly nodded grimly. "I was hoping you'd say that." We called an emergency board meeting that evening. Robert, Mike, Beverly and I reviewed the financial records together. Robert's legal experience was invaluable. He pointed out several entries that were clear red flags. Large checks written to cash, expenses that didn't match up with anything in the neighborhood, duplicate entries for the same supposed project. "This is embezzlement," Robert said flatly. "Patricia has been stealing from the HOA for years." "Can we prove it?" I asked. "Not without a proper audit, but there's enough here to warrant bringing in the authorities." Robert pulled out his phone. "I'm calling a friend who works white-collar crime in Milwaukee. This is serious." The next morning, 2 detectives from the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department showed up to review the documents. We had copies of everything ready for them. They spent 3 hours going through the records, asking questions, taking notes. We'll need to interview Miss Henderson, one of the detectives said, and we'll need to subpoena her bank records. This is going to take some time to unravel, but there's definitely probable cause here. What happens if you confirm she stole the money? Mike asked. Then she'll be charged with embezzlement and theft. Given the amounts involved, we're talking felony charges. She could be looking at several years in prison. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People were shocked, angry, and somehow not surprised. Patricia had always acted like she was above everyone else. Turns out she had been funding that attitude with stolen money. The detectives showed up at Patricia's house on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't there, but Jeff's wife Amanda saw the whole thing from her window. According to her, Patricia answered the door in her usual imperious manner, but her attitude changed quickly when the detectives identified themselves. They were inside for over 2 hours. When they left, they were carrying boxes of documents. Patricia was arrested 3 weeks later. The forensic audit had confirmed what we suspected. She had embezzled nearly $43,000 over the past 4 years. She had been writing checks to herself and marking them as HOA expenses. She had inflated costs for legitimate projects and pocketed the difference. She had even charged personal purchases to the HOA credit card. The arraignment was scheduled for late June. Several of us from the neighborhood attended, wanting to see justice done. Patricia showed up with an expensive lawyer, wearing a conservative dress and pearls, trying to look like a respectable member of the community. The judge wasn't buying it. Bail was set at $50,000. Patricia's husband, a quiet man named Donald who worked in insurance and had always seemed vaguely embarrassed by his wife's behavior, posted it. Patricia was released but ordered to surrender her passport. The trial was set for September. Summer passed in relative peace. The neighborhood was actually pleasant, without Patricia's constant surveillance and harassment. Kids played in the streets. People had barbecues without worrying about noise complaints, and the HOA board focused on actual community improvements like fixing the playground equipment and repainting the entrance sign. Linda Morrison moved away in July. She claimed it was for a job opportunity, but everyone knew she just couldn't handle the shame of being associated with Patricia's crimes. The trial began on September 10th. The prosecution's case was straightforward and damning. They had bank records, canceled checks, credit card statements, and testimony from the forensic accountant. The evidence was overwhelming. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that the HOA's bookkeeping requirements were unclear, that Patricia had believed she was entitled to compensation for her time as president, that there had been misunderstandings about what constituted legitimate expenses. None of it held up. The HOA bylaws were crystal clear. Board members were volunteers who received no compensation. Every check Patricia had written to herself was illegal. Every personal purchase on the HOA credit card was theft. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for October. Patricia was allowed to remain free on bail until then, but you could see the weight of it crushing her. She stopped leaving her house except for required court appearances. Her perfect yard started to look shabby. Her car sat in the driveway, unwashed. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I just felt sad. This whole situation had been so unnecessary. If Patricia had just been reasonable, if she had treated people with respect instead of contempt, none of this would have happened. The snowblower ban had been the catalyst, but the real problem had always been her need to control and dominate everyone around her. Sentencing day came on October 23rd. The courtroom was packed again. The judge had reviewed all the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statements from HOA members, and Patricia's own pleading for leniency. "Miss Henderson," the judge said, looking down at her from the bench, "you were in a position of trust. Your neighbors elected you to manage their community, and you betrayed that trust for personal gain. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a sustained pattern of theft over multiple years. You stole from families, from retirees on fixed incomes, from people who trusted you." Patricia was crying, her expensive lawyer's hand on her shoulder. "I'm sentencing you to 4 years in state prison, with credit for time served. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution of $43,217 to the HOA, plus court costs." "Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia whispered. She was taken into custody immediately. Donald Henderson sat in the gallery, his face buried in his hands. We walked out of the courthouse into crisp October air. The leaves were changing colors, gold and red and orange against the blue sky. "Well," Mike said, "that's that." "Yeah," I agreed. "That's that." Robert checked his phone. "I have to get back to the office. But I'm glad we saw this through. Justice needed to be done." We shook hands and went our separate ways. I drove home, thinking about the past year. It had started with a simple snowstorm and a ridiculous rule, and ended with someone going to prison. The path between those 2 points had been unpredictable, but somehow inevitable. Sarah was home when I arrived, making dinner in the kitchen. I told her about the sentencing. 4 years seems harsh," she said, stirring a pot of soup. "She stole $43,000 from her neighbors and showed no remorse until she got caught. I think 4 years is fair." "What happens to Donald?" "I don't know. That's their business to figure out." We ate dinner quietly, watching the news. The local station had picked up the story, running a segment about HOA corruption. Our neighborhood was briefly famous for all the wrong reasons. But that fame faded quickly, as these things do. By November, life had returned to normal. The HOA had recovered most of the stolen money through Patricia's assets being seized and sold. We used some of it to renovate the community center and upgrade the playground. The rest went into reserves for future projects. Donald Henderson put their house up for sale in December. He was polite but distant when I saw him around the neighborhood, and I didn't push for conversation. The house sold in January to a young couple with twin toddlers. They seemed nice, normal, the kind of people who just wanted a good place to raise their kids. The first major snowstorm of the new year came on a Friday night in late January. I watched it fall, remembering everything that had happened since the last time we'd had snow like this. So much had changed. The neighborhood was different now, better, more relaxed. Saturday morning I got up at 7, had my coffee, and rolled out my snowblower at a reasonable hour. The sound echoed up and down the street, but it was the good kind of noise, the sound of people taking care of their homes and their community. I waved at Jeff as he started his snowblower. Mike was already halfway done with his driveway. The new couple were outside with shovels, laughing as the kids threw snowballs at each other. No fines. No violations. No one peering out windows looking for infractions. Just a normal Saturday morning in a normal neighborhood, exactly as it should be. I finished my driveway and went inside, my back barely aching because I had used the right tool for the job. Sarah handed me a fresh cup of coffee and smiled. "No drama this year," she said. "No drama," I agreed. "Just snow, and that was perfect." The months rolled on, and spring arrived with the usual thaw and mud, and emerging green. The HOA board continued meeting monthly, handling the mundane business of community management without incident. We approved a new landscaping contract for the entrance, organized a neighborhood garage sale, and updated the community directory. Boring stuff, which was exactly what an HOA should be focused on. Beverly Coleman turned out to be a fantastic treasurer. She implemented proper accounting procedures, set up regular audits, and made sure every penny was tracked. Robert handled legal matters when they came up, which was rarely. Mike focused on maintenance issues and coordinating with contractors. I ended up being the general administrator, running meetings and serving as the first point of contact for residents. It worked. The neighborhood thrived. One evening in April, I was mowing the lawn when Donald Henderson approached me. I hadn't seen him in months, not since the house sold. He looked older, tired, but there was a kind of peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Marcus," he said, "do you have a minute?" I killed the mower engine. "Sure, Donald. What's on your mind?" "I'm moving to Florida next week. Got a job down there, starting fresh. I just wanted to say goodbye and to thank you." That surprised me. Thank me for what? For standing up to Patricia, for not letting her get away with it. He looked down at his hands. I knew something was wrong. I should have said something, should have stopped her, but I was too much of a coward. You weren't. You did what was right, even when it was hard. I just wanted to use my snowblower at a reasonable hour, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Donald smiled just a little. It was never about the snowblower. It was about Patricia needing to control everything and everyone. I lived with that for 20 years. I'm glad she can't hurt anyone else now. What will you do when she gets out? I filed for divorce. It'll be final before she's released. I'm done, Marcus. I'm going to spend whatever time I have left living for myself, not cleaning up someone else's messes. He held out his hand. Take care of yourself. Take care of this place. You're good at it. We shook hands and he walked back to his rental car. I watched him drive away, hoping he would find whatever peace he was looking for in Florida. Sarah came out as I was finishing the lawn. Was that Donald? Yeah, he's moving to Florida, starting over. Good for him. He deserves a fresh start. So does everyone, I said. That's kind of the point, isn't it? Fresh starts, second chances, giving people room to be human. Sarah kissed me on the cheek. Look at you, getting all philosophical about lawn care. It's a philosophical kind of evening. Summer brought block parties and kids running through sprinklers, and the smell of grills firing up every weekend. The neighborhood felt alive in a way it hadn't before, like everyone had been holding their breath for years and could finally exhale. In August, we elected Beverly Coleman as the new HOA president. She was reluctant at first, but we convinced her that her steady hand and institutional knowledge made her perfect for the role. She accepted on the condition that we establish term limits for all board positions. No more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms, then you had to step down and let someone else serve. It was a good rule, the kind that would prevent another Patricia Henderson from ever taking root. By the time winter rolled around again, I had almost forgotten about the midnight snowblowing incident that had started everything. Almost. But when the first real storm of the season was forecast, Jeff texted me, going to break out the floodlights for old time's sake. I laughed and texted back, nah, I'm good clearing it at a normal hour like a normal person. Where's your sense of adventure? I used it all up last year. Now I'm just boring and responsible. Boring and responsible is underrated. The snow came on a Sunday morning, 6 inches of light, fluffy powder that was easy to clear. I did it at 9 a.m. Took 20 minutes and went inside for hot chocolate. No drama, no audience, no statement being made, just a guy clearing his driveway because it needed to be done. And that, I realized, was the whole point of everything that had happened. Life shouldn't be dramatic. Communities shouldn't be battlegrounds. People should be able to take care of their homes and their families without someone in authority making everything harder than it needs to be. The HOA existed to help, not to control, to facilitate, not to dominate, to serve the community, not rule over it. Those were the principles we had established, and they seemed to be working. Years passed. I eventually stepped down from the HOA board after serving 2 terms, making way for new blood and fresh perspectives. Sarah and I celebrated our 20th anniversary. Our kids grew up and moved out, starting lives of their own. The neighborhood continued to evolve. New families moved in, old families moved on. The community center got a fresh coat of paint. The playground equipment was upgraded again. Life went on in its gentle, unremarkable way. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia Henderson was released from prison after serving 3 years. She moved to somewhere in Minnesota, I think. Her name came up occasionally in conversations, usually as a cautionary tale or a punchline to a joke about overzealous HOA boards, but mostly, people forgot about her. That's the thing about petty tyrants. They seem so important in the moment, but they fade quickly once their power is gone. One December evening, I was sitting in my living room watching snow fall outside when Sarah came in and sat next to me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just remembering that whole snowblower mess from years ago. Seems like another lifetime now." It kind of was. We're different people now. The neighborhood is different, different, definitely better. She squeezed my hand. "You know what I appreciate most about how that all turned out?" "What's that?" "You didn't let it make you bitter. A lot of people would have held onto that anger, let it poison them, but you fought for what was right, saw it through, and then let it go. That takes strength." I thought about that. She was right. I could have become obsessed with Patricia Henderson, with getting revenge, with making sure she suffered. But what would have been the point? Justice had been served. The community had been protected. That was enough. "Besides," I said, grinning at Sarah, "I got a great story out of it. Remember that first night I fired up the snowblower at midnight? The look on Patricia's face when she came storming down the street," Sarah laughed. "I thought she was going to have a stroke right there in the middle of the road. Good times. Weird times. Good weird times." We sat together watching the snow, comfortable in the silence, grateful for the peaceful, drama-free life we had built. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of a snowblower. Someone clearing their driveway at 8:30 on a Sunday night, which was perfectly allowed under the HOA rules. No one would complain. No one would file a violation. No one would be fined. It was just the sound of someone taking care of their home, which was exactly as it should be. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the neighborhood in white, covering everything in a fresh start. Tomorrow morning, I would go out with my snowblower at a reasonable hour and clear my driveway. Maybe Jeff and I would have coffee afterward, maybe we wouldn't. Either way, it would be fine. Because that's what community really is. Not rules and regulations and power struggles, but just people living their lives alongside each other, helping when needed, giving space when wanted, and trusting that everyone is doing their best. It took a midnight snowblowing session and a prison sentence to learn that lesson, but I guess some lessons just take dramatic teaching methods. I wouldn't change any of it, though. Every part of that experience, from Patricia's ridiculous snowblower ban to her eventual arrest and conviction, had shaped me and shaped this community. We had been tested, and we had come through it stronger, wiser, more united. And now, years later, I could sit in my warm living room with my wife, watching snow fall, and feel genuinely grateful for everything that had happened, even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, because those were the moments that revealed who we really were and what we stood for. Sarah dozed off against my shoulder. I pulled a blanket over both of us and kept watching the snow, thinking about how lucky I was. Lucky to live in a good neighborhood with good people. Lucky to have had the courage to stand up when standing up mattered. Lucky to have seen justice done. Lucky to be here now in this moment of perfect peace. Tomorrow I would clear the snow. Next week there would be an HOA meeting to attend. Next month there would be other concerns and other responsibilities. But right now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The snow fell softly outside, muffling the world in white silence, and I felt nothing but contentment. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just building a better life than the one someone tried to force on you. Sometimes it's just proving that kindness and reason can triumph over pettiness and control. Sometimes it's just sitting in your warm house, watching snow fall, knowing that tomorrow you'll clear your driveway at 9 in the morning like a normal person, and no one will say a damn thing about it. That's freedom. That's victory. That's what I fought for when I fired up that snowblower at midnight all those years ago, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat.